Hello, hello, and welcome to the Alliance of Women Directors. I'm Melanie Mack, the Executive Director overseeing Los Angeles and Atlanta, our AWD South branch. Today, I'm in conversation with the incredible producers, directors, and junior showrunner for the National Geographic series, Queens.
Thank you. Thanks. My name is Faith Musembi, and I'm one of the producer directors on Queens.
Hey, my name is Rachel Kinley. I'm one of the producer directors on Queens, and I was also the junior showrunner.
And my name is Elira Malaliu, and I'm also one of the producer directors on Queens.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being with us today. We are so happy to have all of you, and thank you for making time to stop by and be in conversation with us. In this series, we journey to 6 extraordinary locations on our planet, each ruled by one of the most powerful female animals. These queens are not just leaders in their respective habitats, but they are also sisters, mothers, grandmothers, and friends. Through their stories, we will explore the complexities of female relationships, the challenges they face, and the love and support they provide to their families. I'd like to know, just opening up, can you talk about, let's get into episode 1 first, the African Queens, which really sets the tone. How did the dynamic of sisterhood play a crucial role in the lion pride featured in this episode?
Yeah, so those lions, the sisters, they're actually incredible force together, and Faith herself witnessed the kind of really power of these females when they came together to defend themselves and defend their cubs from the males that came in. Because I was the producer director over the main series, but I contacted Faith quite early on to be a field director on that with me. So Faith, you want to talk about what it was like to be with those sisters?
Oh, for sure. I had the privilege of, or I have the privilege of being a Kenyan filmmaker, and at the time I was living in Kenya, and I was contacted to work on this amazing series, and being in the field and seeing how these females come together to protect their cubs, but also thinking ahead. One of the amazing things that happens in the series, and this is a bit of a spoiler for someone who hasn't seen it, is you see this female trick this male into believing the cubs are his. And it's something we'd heard happens, but it's one of those things, it's almost like a myth in wildlife, because not very many people had seen it, but seeing how her sisters helped her do it and how the mother did it. I mean, it gives you chills when you see it happening in the wild, because at that point, we'd been filming them for a while, we'd fallen in love with them, and we didn't really want the male to come in and to wipe out all of them. So seeing it happen was really quite special. And yeah, so we filmed that, and then Rachel had the privilege of having to watch everything, and yeah, to edit and cut it all together.
Yes, and having the narration of the incredible Angela Bassett, that scene, or those scenes in particular, really just had me smiling when Angela says, but when they're nursing, that they're not fertile, which I found very interesting. And then Angela says, but she can fake it. And you see the lion, just kind of following her. And also that goes into the exploration of consent among female and male animals when we're looking at the hyenas that were covered, as well as the lions. Will one of you speak to that as well?
Yeah, that was a really strong theme that I was, even at the beginning when we were writing out story beats that we hoped to film, consent was something that we really wanted to cover in this, because it's such an integral part of kind of the female existence. And to have these hyenas whose genitalia has evolved as such, so that basically they can't be raped, no male can force themselves onto them. And so that then means they have power over themselves and over their own sexual reproduction, which then means that it doesn't make any sense for males to evolve bigger and stronger. So females have the power, and they're the leaders there, and it gives them this intense and really kind of beautiful role in society, that when you see hyenas and you see their dynamic, it's something definitely that, you know, we could learn a lot from that, really. I mean, maybe not by killing our nieces and nephews, but potentially there's a lot there in terms of women having their own sexual power and being able to make decisions about who they have sex with or not.
Yes, yes. Talk about in what ways does the hyena queen navigate clan politics and enforce hierarchy to maintain her position?
Yeah, I guess this is what I was touching on earlier, in that the hyena queen, she will stop at nothing in order to kind of get the crown, because if you're the highest ranking hyena, it means you get preferential access to food. It means that your cubs have more likelihood of reaching adulthood, and you have more cubs in quick succession. And the way that you kind of maintain your role in as hyena queen or as matriarch is that you need to have as many followers as possible, and you get that by being charismatic, you get that by having offspring. And so there's these two sisters who are kind of rivals because they've both got similar potential to be leaders, but in order to get to the top, one of the sisters kills the other sister's cub, and that's where it all kind of where the story starts from.
And that was Aisha.
And it's
Right. It was
Aisha, yeah, exactly.
was
And
Aisha,
she, you know, Aisha's a wonderful hyena. It's not that she's like totally evil, just sometimes that's just what happens in nature. They've got to sit themselves up in different ways in order to get what they need for their own families.
Wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about episode 2, Rainforest Queens. What role would you say friendship played in the survival and success of the Bonobo Society?
Yeah, that was my episode, so I can talk to that. Yeah, friendship is kind of key for bonobos. So they are, for people who don't know, we're just as closely related to them as we are to chimpanzees. But bonobos, the females are in charge. They're much more peaceful than the chimps. And it's really the friendship between the females that gives them their power. So they form these really strong bonds, and it means that even though the males are bigger physically and they are stronger than the females, that if a male kind of steps out of line and starts throwing his weight around, the females will group together and they'll defend each other, and they don't tolerate it. Yeah, it means that they have the upper hand, really. And you know, also I think just for their well-being, you know, they're really tactile animals. They love to be close to each other. Just like humans, they really need the company of others. You know, they'll die if they're alone from, you know, orphan babies and the ones that are helped in Lola Ya Bonobo. They need the care of a caregiver, whether that's a human who's looking after them or their family. So yeah, for them, friendship is everything, really.
Yes, that was so beautiful to see, just the sisterhood among the bonobos. The scene, one scene in particular with two members, and there's a scene where they have a raised arm and interlocked hands. It was such a beautiful just camaraderie, sisterhood. Just the way that was illustrated was so beautiful. And also just seeing, as you spoke to the bonobos and the orphans who need nurture and care and love, and if it's not received, they will die without that. The same things that we need, right, as human beings. So it was beautifully captured. I'm in love with the bonobo. I wasn't familiar with them. I did not know that we share 99% of our DNA with them. So it was beautiful to watch, as well as so informative. What kind of research went into this project?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. You know, we had a long pre-production phase, and I think for each of the episodes had their own challenges. You know, with something like bonobos, there's not there are research projects studying them, but they've only been recognized as their own individual species since the 70s. I think I'm right in saying. And they've not really been filmed before properly. So we spent a lot of time on the phone with scientists, reading papers, you know, trying to discuss the kinds of behaviors that we might be able to see, and then putting things in place to try and film things that hadn't been seen before, or the scientists might have seen it, but, you know, there was no guarantee we'd get it. So, you know, one of the things we really wanted to try and film with bonobos was to film them from up in the treetops, to see them in their world. And the scientists had never attempted that before, so they had no idea whether or not that would be successful, whether they'd be frightened. And so one of our bursary camera positions, Tanya, she spent 7 months in the field in the end with the bonobos, and she spent weeks up tree platforms, tiny little tree platforms, you know, waiting to see whether the bonobos would come. And she did get some wonderful footage of them. And she told a great story of how the first time they came to her tree, you know, she wasn't sure how they'd react, and no one, you know, they'd never seen a human being up a tree before, so no one knew what would happen. But initially the males came up and were displaying around her and kind of showing off, and then the matriarch of the group came up and looked at her and said, yeah, okay, I trust you. And she settled down, and the whole group settled around her, and they started feeding, and then they even made their beds next to her at night. So she ended up being the first person to be with them up a tree, and also the first person to go to bed with a group of wild bonobos. And that was a really special shoot, really, and moment, because I think that was a culmination of a lot of research, a lot of time speaking to scientists, and you know, hoping for this kind of behavior, but not being sure that we'd get it. And I think all of the episodes had that, really, yeah, for various different things. And so, yeah, don't know if that answers your question.
It does, and seeing the camera platforms and the height at the levels of it really brought the audience into the environment. I felt like I was in the tree, just in the trees and in the rainforest with her. So it was, again, just so beautiful to watch. Tell me about I would say, like, with the young bonobo protagonists navigating the challenges of fitting into a new group and impressing the alpha male. How were you able to capture that?
It was what we'd hoped to film, and so it was kind of luck, really, that there happened to be a young female at the right stage of life. So all of the female bonobos go through this broadly. There's, I think, maybe one example of a female who doesn't leave her family, but basically they all leave, and they all have to join a new group at some point, and yeah, make friends there, and kind of find their place. And it's not usually until they've had their first baby that they really cement their position in that group. And so it was kind of luck, really, that we were there, but, you know, for that moment. But yeah, because there's a number of bonobo groups in the area, it's kind of happens every year, really. So yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about episode 3, the Jungle Queens. Those tiny queens were something else, let me tell you. I'm sure I don't have to tell you, but oh my goodness, just watching was riveting. How did the 2 queens, first let's talk about the orchid bee. How did she demonstrate different forms of power and leadership in their respective colonies?
That was also my episode. So yeah, the orchid bee, you know, she looks beautiful, and she's got this amazing armor, and she's powerful. She looks after herself. She's quite different from the leafcutter ant, which had these huge colonies, and these, you know, they have millions of them by the time the colony is grown. The bees have much smaller groups, and so our film starts with a female who is finding pollen and nectar. She's going to make individual egg cells, and she feeds them these mixture of pollen and nectar. But she's also ruthless, you know, I think that's one of the nice things about Queens, is that we don't show that female animals are all soft and kind and lovely all of the time. You know, she's a bit of a cold hard bitch, really. She you know, she effectively eats her own grandchildren
She did.
to trick her daughter to raise more of her own children. So yeah, when I remember when we first heard about that behavior, and we thought that is an amazing story, and how do we include that in the film? So yeah, she's pretty ruthless, but you know, she's just doing what's best for her, really.
Yes, and I thought poor Dyla. I mean, one when when the mother is laying her egg and only to, I mean, we're hearing the narration about what is going to happen when Dyla is born and fully formed, that she will be essentially enslaved and do the bidding of her mother. And I couldn't help but it wasn't funny, but I was just laughing out loud at the dialogue about the orchard bee never having to work again once she had the birth of her daughter.
Mm.
Was really fascinating to watch. And also, I was heartbroken to see when the mother was killed, and you see Dyla waiting and waiting for a time that's never going to return. So I'm curious, in nature, how did Dyla know that she was now queen?
I think that's just time, you know, her mother just doesn't come back, and then they start to have these changes in their pheromones. She'll lay her eggs and suddenly they won't be eaten, and then her babies will be born. And so it's just behavior that gets passed on, and then she'll always be laying so they can control whether they're laying a female egg or a male egg. And they know that, so she can know, okay, I've got a daughter, and now now I'm in charge. So I'm going to be the one eating the eggs.
It's it's interesting. I also found that fascinating with this idea and the fact that the orchid bee can control whether or not they birth a female or male child. And thinking about that, I think about friends who have gone through different procedures because they want to have a daughter or because they want sons. And a friend of mine who, she ended up having two sets of girl twins, and she went through a spinning process. And I don't think it's as quite detailed as what was shown in nature, but it was interesting just to see compare and contrast what women deal with in terms of birthing and their birthing experience and wanting to build a family, and the reasons they have for that, and then also examining the reasons that happen in nature, particularly with the insects that were highlighted in this particular episode.
Yeah, and I think with this species, what always fascinated me when we started early on to choose what species will be in Queens is that these bees had been filmed quite a few times before, but only from the male perspective. They'd always been interested in filming the male bees. And there's all this rich story that occurs with the females that people just hadn't thought was interesting. And we find that again and again in Queens. And it's something that absolutely fascinates me, that there's all these amazing stories out there in nature that people don't haven't heard or aren't aware of, because the lens has always been turned one way with them.
Yes. Yes, and that's I want to get into that. I definitely want to get into the all-female production crew. I have some questions coming up around that, which is just outstanding. Let's talk about the Faith, if you could talk to me about Behind the Queens, which again just made me fall in love even more with the series, just seeing how the crew supported one another, and just all of the support that was provided and provisions to accomplish a collective goal. Talk to me about that episode.
That's, I mean, for me, it's a really special episode. So for context, I started out on Queens as a field director, and I had the privilege of working on Rachel's episode and also on the elephant episode, which is Victoria's episode. And we went on this journey because Queens was very intentional from the beginning that we were trying to make a series that was different. But I think what kicks everything to the next level is we weren't just trying to have a product that's different than it's traditionally been, but the process of it also had to be different, which meant kind of turning that lens, as Rach was saying, and focusing on the female stories, but also having female-led crews, giving women an opportunity to lead in spaces that have typically been given to men or been taken over by men. And, you know, we went on this journey and also working with local filmmakers. As I mentioned, I'm from Kenya and East Africa. And up until Queens, I hadn't been able to work on any premium wildlife show like Queens. It just wasn't possible because the staffing came out of the UK and the crews would parachute into Kenya because Kenya's always got stuff to film. There's no shortage of natural history series being filmed in Kenya. But locals couldn't work on these crews, which blows your mind when you think about it. You know, I'm Kenyan and I can't work on a series that's being filmed in my country, but Queens was different. And yes, so we went on this relationship, and then towards the end, National Geographic and the execs at WildStar have a conversation, and we realize we want to shine a spotlight on the process because we've had these incredible mentees and mentors who've given their time, because the reality of trying to do anything female-led in this space is there weren't enough women. So we needed also to have male allies. We had amazing women-led organizations as well that worked hand in hand with us. And we figured, okay, great. We need to tell this story. And it was a privilege of a lifetime when I was given that project or that story really to bring together, because at that point, and our showrunner used this as a deal sweetener when we were talking about the possibility of me producing an episode. I think she said something along the lines of, "You'll be making a film about your friends." And I mean, and it hit me. It's true, you know, because at that point, you've been working together for 2-3 years, and now this massive remit. Can you tell the story that captures the journey that we've been on? And I'm so proud of how that episode came together, because you truly do get a sense of the heart and soul of the process and the legacy that we know is going to be left behind by the series. So yeah, all that to say, super proud of the episode and really joy and privilege of my life working on it.
Yes. And I was so I was saddened to see the elephant that you'd had a long time relationship with, just in you know, playing the music, and the fact that she was blind and would know that could just sense your presence, and to see that she had passed was just, it broke my heart. And so I can only imagine how you feel about that.
Yeah, it was really devastating. And I think the beautiful thing about her being a part of the story is I'd fallen in love with her. Working on the elephant episode, we knew that she could never be a character because for that episode, we wanted to show these themes of sisterhood and just being together. And here's this solitary female that's never with anyone, but always on the edge of everything. But I'd been drawn to her, and she was pregnant, and that's why we were keeping an eye on her in case she had a baby. Then maybe the story could have pivoted because we would have been able to film it. So separately, I'd fallen in love with her, and I remember thinking to myself, oh man, I mean, she'd be such a great character. I mean, she's blind by herself, but she'd be great. And then when we started talking about showing my process on this Queen's journey and realizing she's going to be a part of the story, I was so excited like, yes, we get to showcase who she is. So we didn't even find out that she died until the final shoot. I think it was a few days to go. Rachel was on that shoot directing me because I needed someone to direct me because I'm in the episode. So it was really heartbreaking. And at one point, because it was such a personal story, I didn't know that I could go through with showing this side of things, especially when she's gone, and I don't know what to do about it. You know, I love her so much, but in having Rachel out there and the rest of the crew being super supportive and being sensitive in how that was covered, and me going through that healing journey and realizing actually this is great because it literally does spur me forward in wanting to do this even more. Because if people could feel what I felt for her, then the world is going to change, and I'm really hoping that that happens, because that's really what we need. These animals need that.
Yes. And how wonderful it is that she's captured, Selenge is captured on film, you know, for the world to fall in love with. And so just that was just such a beautiful piece. And just when the camera pans out and you're walking away, and just to see her there, yeah, I was in tears. Just, it was such a beautiful shot. But you connected her to all of us, to the audience. What are some of the lessons that our viewers can take away from the stories of these inspiring women and their tireless efforts to protect the animal queens and their iconic homes? How can this influence future conservation efforts and storytelling in the natural history genre?
I think ultimately it's that message of resilience and adaptability, really, because you see, and we do, and Angela says it, which is just so beautiful to hear her say it. She says, against all odds, they persisted, and it's true for the women that were on the team, as well as for the organizations that we worked with. Because when you consider Team Lioness, I mean, they're not, you know, a highly trained military organization with rifles and all of that. They're just run of the mill. I mean, not run of the mill as an insult, but they're just the regular average woman who's decided to make a difference in her sphere of influence. And that's really inspirational. And even though they come from an indigenous community where women typically don't have that much say in how things are run, but they've decided we're going to do things differently because we need to conserve these animals. And same can be said for the bonobo mamas. They, in caring for these bonobos the way they do, they're leaving their families behind, and just sometimes spending crazy amounts of times to rehabilitate some of the really traumatized orphans. I mean, some of the stories they told us, you're bawling because you're thinking, oh my gosh, how is this happening? But that's the ultimate message, that it doesn't matter what you're up against. You don't need to, you know, save the whole world, but you can just do the tiny bit that you can in your sphere of influence, and that will have the knock-on effect.
Yes. I want to talk about some of the, just what were some of the challenges that all of you faced by the production team in capturing intimate and rarely seen moments of these powerful female animals?
Well, talking about bonobos again, I think that was one of the most kind of logistically difficult films to make, really, because as I said, the bonobos haven't really been filmed that much before. They're quite shy. They live only in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and they live in very remote forests. So getting crew to location was really difficult, and it was then incredibly physically demanding, because you have to carry all of your gear on foot, and you have to get up at 3 in the morning and walk for maybe 12 kilometers through the forest, carrying the camera, carrying the tripod, and then you find the bonobos, and then you spend all day with them. You walk a few more kilometers, and then you have to walk another 12 kilometers home again, and eat some rice and beans and sleep in your tent. And so that, you know, from a kind of safety point of view and just crew dynamics point of view, making sure we had the right teams on location and that everyone could have rest days and all of that stuff, you know, that was definitely a challenging film, really, from that perspective. And I think on one of the shoots, the medic on our shoot lost 18 kilos of weight from how much walking he was doing. And I think he'd set out to lose a bit anyway, so we weren't starving them. We did have enough calories for them, but it was just, you know, it was really hard going, and they did amazingly well. And I think we, you know, that film started out when we were planning it, we weren't sure how much we would get of the bonobos because we just didn't know what we'd be able to film. And so we'd planned that it would have forest elephants in it. And we actually filmed the forest elephants, and the film was going to be a two-hander between the two characters. And then in the edit, we realized that we had so much amazing, beautiful, intimate footage of the bonobos that actually it detracted from the story to break it up with the elephants. And so sadly for the elephants, you know, we dropped them from the film. But I think, yeah, we hadn't expected to get that, certainly. And that was a real surprise. But I think people felt that throughout Queens, really, that actually before we started, everyone was a bit nervous of turning the lens on the female animals where there's not so much science and people haven't looked at them so much. Are we going to have enough behavior for this to be interesting? What are we actually going to be filming? What are our stories actually going to be? And I think over and over again, we were really pleasantly surprised by just how much stuff that all of the characters do and how much drama there is in their lives when you just look at them. So, yeah.
Yes, and isn't that true for women in general? I mean, there's so much that that we do in terms of work, motherhood, whether you're working inside of the home, outside of the home, caring for family, caring for your partner, becoming caregivers. You know, if your parents are aging, and it's just there are just so many hats that we wear. There are literally so many hats that we wear. And just for me, moving into a caregiving stage with my own family, it's very challenging to balance everything. And, you know, you wear a smile and work through things that are very difficult. I am not going to complain, however, just hearing about having to carry camera equipment and walking through that, just traverse through the land. And yeah, if I hear one person complain about holding a backpack or anything, I'm going to pull up this interview. I'm just letting you know. So what were some of the talk about some of the decisions, all of you just talk about some of the decisions that went into the selection process for the locations.
Rach, you want to
So
talk
I
about?
think, yeah, the locations, I guess, were came from the species that we wanted to film. So as Elira said earlier, we had such a long pre-production period. I started on this series 5 years ago, and we were going through all the different species to try and work out which ones we thought would be the best ones to tell, that had the bigger messages, as we discussed earlier. So the program one, which I looked at, was about consent and sisterhood and kind of those binding messages that came together. And then all the series had those wider narratives we wanted to tell. And within that, we chose species that we thought would work well together, whether they lived in the same location and could then feather together to tell the best narratives. And from that was then the research, speaking to the scientists to choose the locations, because we really needed animals that were accessible, you know, to varying degrees. You can jump in a Land Rover and film a lion or a hyena quite easier than you can access a bonobo in the DRC. But they all needed to have something that, you know, was accessible for us, that told a wider story, and where hopefully there could be some great teams on the ground that we could work with and build up the local talent. Faith in Kenya, and also we filmed with a lady called Erica in Tanzania, who's the world's first black long lens camerawoman, and really wanted to bring her and her skills on. So it was looking at the animals and also the crews that we could use to film them as well that went together.
Wonderful. In what ways do the stories of the game-changing women featured in the episode inspire and shed light on the challenges faced by scientists, conservationists, and activists working to protect the animals in their habitats?
Oh, that's such a great question. I would say we're talking about the challenges, right? And how they rise and face them. I mean, one of the challenges that the whole world is dealing with right now is just the issue of climate change and how that, or what that means to all these animals. And again, I'd say it's that idea of resilience, because we haven't figured it out. But we're working with scientists, researchers, the things we can do to make things better. But then even when we look at the animal societies, such as the elephants, and how they're dealing with the challenges of their world is changing. And the thing about elephants is they pass down information from the matriarchs to the rest of the herd. And as the world changes, the information they have isn't current. But then you see how they adapt and they realize, okay, we used to get water at this well. We can't get water here because they're humans, and they're always constantly pivoting, switching, adapting. And we see that with the bonobo mothers as well, as they're taking in more orphans because of the war in the Congo, but also because of just the pet trade and how all these challenges are coming in. People are just constantly adapting, pivoting, and figuring out, well, we can't address the bigger problem just yet, but how can we make things better for the bits that we can change? So yeah, so the long and the short of it, I'd say it's that idea of just being resilient and having perseverance and adapting.
Wonderful. Rachel, this is for you. With your background in landmark presenter-led and observational documentaries, how did you approach the storytelling and filmmaking style for Queens to capture the essence of the powerful female animals featured in the show?
I came to this series and first off just wanted to do a big broad brushstrokes look at what themes we wanted to cover in it, and then within that, like I say, tried to select the correct animals and the correct location of the animals' behavior that went together. And for me, I was really kind of drawn to the sisterhood, these three lionesses, and how they work together. The editor that I was cutting with, we were on board together from the start, and she's one of three sisters as well. So that was something that kind of unified us. And you've been speaking about the parallels that you draw between the audience and the animals that are on screen. And that's something that was always in the forefront of our mind when we did this. We always wanted these animals to feel adaptable, to feel relational, and something that you could get from them. And I think that the wider arc of the series and how the characters developed was, we really wanted it to be something that people could feel affinity to. And so the consent was at the forefront of our minds with it. And we weren't allowed to use the word clitoris on screen because naturally I don't like it, but hyenas have got a 6 to 8 inch clitoris, and that's why they can't be raped, because that's the appendage that they have that hangs down, that has to constitute them up to have sex with. So we wanted to have these things that really kind of ultimately showed female power and female strength. And so that were really good elements that we put together in this.
Okay. Congratulations on your RTS award and One World Media Award.
Thank you.
And BAFTA nomination as well. How have these accolades influenced your approach to wildlife filmmaking?
Oh, I mean, I think that everything that you do builds on something else that you've done before. And the accolades are for me, but they're also for the great teams that work together. And I think that was the thing about Queens here, is that everybody brought something through themselves, and that's what you learn through kind of the time on working on all different sorts of series, is that there's not just one person who's making these programs. You might have the credit as director, but it's the researchers, the assistant producers, the production managers, production coordinators, and how everyone comes together. And that's what the way that we made Queens and the way that the teams were built up was just different to anything that I'd worked on before in that way. So the accolades might have come from previous series, but what this was it was something that was kind of new and special, where there was a foundation of trust between everybody. Because I started off on this with a 7-month-old baby as a single mum, so I had to kind of navigate this new world in a way that I wasn't able to go on location as much as I had done previously, and having the support and the staffing structure that was created around that, so that it could keep me in my job, and having all these amazing people that kind of helped to build it up. I don't think that I'd be in the industry anymore if it wasn't for Queens, because usually if you're a wildlife director, you have to go on location, you have to spend months in the field, you have to be the people that are out there. But this was staffed in a way that those up and coming directors who wanted to have that field experience, or local directors like Faith, you could do that, and we could be in communication with each other and really have a kind of connectivity and a collaboration with it. So I think that Queens, was better and different than anything that I've done before.
You know, I think this could also be just the model of support is something that I would love to be able to kind of pick up and utilize as a blueprint and model for women that are working within the entertainment industry, particularly in corporate and different environments, because they're usually, and I've been in the industry for 20 plus years, there's usually not much support around women and support for family.
Yeah, totally. And Queens, when we began, I think there was 5 women on the production team, all at quite high levels, who had recently returned from maternity leave. And then during the production, 3 of us went off on maternity leave again. So there was a lot of family issues that we had to deal with, and other people who weren't necessarily mothers, but they were caregivers for somebody, as you spoke about yourself. And so there's a lot of human issues and real humanity and actual life that was incorporated into this. And I think on previous productions, you're supposed to sort of box that off and forget it, pretend that that's not there, and try and come to work and just be a robot or just be yourself, or mark that out. But that was never the Queen's way with it. The Queen's way was, okay, tell me what your issues are. Let's help craft this so that you can do the best that you can do, and everyone with you is aware of that and supports you, and everyone gets out of it what they need to get out of it. It was absolutely fantastic.
And just so happy to hear that, because as a mother and working in corporate at the start of my career, I literally hid my pregnancy with my firstborn for 8 months. 8 months. And it was just kind of this unspoken rule that families were frowned upon. And if you're deciding to be a mother, then you can't be serious about being an executive. How can you do both? And so if people learn that you're expecting, the process begins to kind of push you out of the industry. And I've heard so many women share, my story isn't unique, so I've heard so many women share that. So just to hear that how women rallied and supported one another, and really, and passing the baton, and allowing for breaks to be on maternity leave and to come back, with grace and those things. So it's just wonderful to know that these things were taking place within the series.
And if I could add to that, we found that Elira also went off and had her baby. But one of the producers on the elephant episode as well, Vic, had her baby, and she says, because she was allowed to go through the whole process and stay working, that actually informed her storytelling, because the elephant episode is about this first-time mother, and even though Vic wasn't a first-time mother at the time, her firstborn was, Rachel probably gonna know more than me. I don't know how old her son was, but
Freddie was about 6 months when we were first approached about Queens, and Zoe was born during the production,
in the midst
and
of
I took
filming.
over from Vic. maternity cover. Yeah,
Yeah. So she
but
was
she
trying to
definitely found that
navigate
in
this
the
whole
storytelling.
motherhood thing. And that fed into that story, and it became really personal for her. And I mean, I know, Elara, you also went off and on maternity leave.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for me, the productions I'd worked on before, I'd never seen, there was no model that I had really seen of women in senior editorial positions having babies and
Yes.
having roles that high. I'd never worked on a production like that before, and I'd never really imagined what it would look like to have a family and how I would do it. I always knew I wanted children, but I just kind of thought, I'd just worry about that another time. And then, you know, being part of Queens and seeing all of these women in these senior positions doing amazingly and being amazing at their jobs and having kids, and the fact that the production could trust them, you know, yeah, they maybe had to leave early to pick up their child who was sick, but that was fine and no one would even question it. And, you know, just to see all of those little subtle things that made you think, oh, okay, I could do that, that's doable, made me feel so much more comfortable going into first time motherhood and not feeling terrified that I was going to throw away this career I'd worked so hard for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think all of this comes from Vanessa Berlowitz, who's the creative director. She founded Wildstar Films, who's the company that made Queens. And her son is a teenager now, but early on when she first had a child, there weren't many women who were able to pursue their career and have a child at the same time. So she'd be sent off to Antarctica for months when she had a tiny little newborn and didn't know how to say no, didn't know how to have these conversations. So she deliberately and specifically crafted a company where it's okay, where people feel welcome and happy and supported in it. Yeah, and it's incredible.
And it's necessary. It's something that's necessary. I think it shouldn't even be. There shouldn't be any sort of pause around that. It's just it's something that should be automatically done.
Yeah.
Elara, I wanted to speak with you about your impressive background in working on acclaimed natural history series such as The Hunt, Our Planet, and David Attenborough's A Life on Our Planet. How have these experiences shaped your approach to storytelling and filmmaking in the wildlife genre?
Yeah, I mean, I loved working on those series. You know, they were kind of my childhood aspirations. To work with David Attenborough was a dream come true, to actually get to go on shoot with David. And you know, they're very traditional kind of, yeah, it's the traditional natural history, big budget series. And I think I learned a lot from them of the kind of field craft and the time that you'd need to invest in filming real big behavioral sequences. I learned a lot about cameras that I didn't know anything about when I started out in the industry, working with some of the best cinematographers in the world and working with very high level expensive equipment, you know, taught me really well. And I really enjoyed kind of getting to understand how the technology works and how you can use it to get different imagery. And I think when I started on Queens, I found it hard initially to sort of shed that very, you know, it's quite planet earthy, quite serious style of storytelling. And I remember initially finding it difficult to find my way with the insect story because I was kind of taking it down quite a sciencey route, and then over time sort of shedding that slightly and getting more into the kind of the Disney Nat Geo storytelling vibe of Queens, which I now absolutely love. And I loved the freedom of that creatively. And I think, yeah, I think those kind of big other series kind of, they allowed me to bring that knowledge of how to get amazing, beautiful cinematography of wild animals, and then use that to tell a story that we wouldn't have told in those series. You know, the style of Queens is really different to those. And the storytelling and the music and everything is different, but we still wanted it to look like Planet Earth. We wanted it to look beautiful and to have all that technology. And I think, yeah, that I found that really helpful.
Yes. Oh my gosh, we could have an entire conversation about the music. The music was just it was so wonderfully placed, and just moving, stirring, and I loved every moment. I would also ask you what drew you to this project? I mean, being that your background, as you said, it was just much more serious, and you adapted to the Nat Geo Disney Plus style. What drew you to this project?
I think Vanessa, initially, her and her husband Mark, who set WildStar up, also used to work with Silverback, which is where I'd worked before, who to make those other series, and so I knew them from there. And I think I also felt that this lack of another voice and other ways of telling stories, and that's not to say there's anything wrong with those big serious David Attenborough series, but they do what they do very well, and I think I felt like a desire to tell a different story, and to have a different way of working, and to work with women in creative roles. And so I remember when Vanessa told me about the idea for Queens, and also it just feels like it's an amazing idea, and I can't believe someone hasn't made it already. You think, how has someone not done a series on female animals? And so as soon as she told me, I was like, yes, I'm in. I want to do it. Sign me up. So yeah, it was no question.
Okay. Faith, for you, your journey in natural history storytelling has taken you from being a broadcast director for Safari Live to working on acclaimed series like The Incredible Animal Journeys and Chasing the Rains. How have these experiences shaped your perspective on the role of storytelling and in raising awareness about conservation issues?
I would say starting out in natural history doing live is probably I'd say one of the best preparations, because on a live show you're having to tell a story as it unfolds, and with animals you can't script them. I mean, they're gonna do what they're gonna do, and when you're directing a live show you just have to make a story of what's happening. So I think that sharpened my sense of storytelling very quickly, or seeing things unfolding. And that's been really useful with the kind of storytelling we do, or the filming we do on these blue chip premium wildlife shows, because you're more considered with the shots you're going for. But the reality is the animals are still doing what they want to do, and everything's happening very quickly. But because I've kind of been trained in that fast thinking live mentality, yeah, I find that's informed how I'm able to react to it. And with the Incredible Animal Journeys, I mean, that was a very much like a traditional what Elira was talking about, very serious but still Disney Nat Geo kind of show. So and that has its own different approach. It was a different company that made it. I'd say all these different experiences, you're always growing, you're always having your muscles strengthened, stretched. You're always having to kind of look at things through a different perspective, because when you work with different executives, different commissioners, what they're looking for is different. And I think that puts you on your toes, and it's part of what keeps me, or keeps drawing me into all these different projects, as I love being challenged that way. Like, how can you tell this story that's been told a million times differently? So I'd say, yeah, those few experiences have kind of like kept me on my toes, and I'm hoping that keeps happening.
Yes. For each of you, share one memorable moment from the series. One of the most memorable moments personally. Rachel, I'll start with you. I can see you thinking over there.
Yeah, I think I was out on location a few times, and the most kind of memorable shots that we got was we were able to film with a helicopter with a gimbal mounted on it in the crater for the first time. No one had been able to do that before. And so we flew up, and we went back, and we back, and we back, and we pulled back and pulled back and pulled back, higher and higher and higher, till we reached just about the top of how high it could fly. And then you could see all the crater within there. And that was just magnificent to finally pull back and see all that.
Beautiful.
I
Ilara?
think, yeah, I think mine, I did a number of shoots in various places for the tiny jungle episode, and I think one of the longest and most involved one was where we were trying to film the emergence of the winged ants, and they come out maybe one night a year, and it's triggered by the beginning of the rainy season. Even though you're in a jungle, they do actually kind of have rainy seasons, so it's really hit and miss when that starts. So we ended up being on location for 7 weeks, and it happens at night, and we couldn't use visible light to film the ants because it would disturb them. So we had to work with infrared light, which we can't see. So we were effectively working in pitch darkness, and we were filming with modified helium, no, Monstro, a red Monstro, which we were loaned by Red, and that had been modified so it only shot black and white, and we used a special infrared filter so it could record infrared light. And so yeah, every night we would go and check these ant nests, and it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening, and then, you know, it was a sort of traditional natural history thing. We were there for weeks and weeks, and then eventually it started to happen. These winged ants started to come out, and we managed to get all the cameras there on time, and there was just this amazing scene where, you know, the ant's nest is about 20 meters squared when it's full sized, and the whole floor is full, covered in ants. And it's all these winged ants, and then there's all the soldier ants, and basically the whole colony are like out of the nest to protect the winged ants. And they all start taking off. They only flew for about 10 minutes, I think. But being there to witness that, after so many weeks of being on location, to see something which, you know, really few people ever see with their eyes, was amazing. And it was, yeah, it was a really cool experience. And it was also very painful because we got bitten a lot by a lot of the ants. But yeah, that was one of those kind of wonderful, proper wildlife experiences where you're like, I'm seeing some amazing behavior right now.
Yes. Oh my gosh, incredible. And for you, Faye?
Oh man, I'd have to say it's for Rachel's app. You know, it's that scene where the mom is protecting her cubs.
Yes.
Because everything was unfolding real time. It's something we'd actually been in touch with the people on the ground. We knew it was behavior that was coming. The males were new to the area, so we knew the chances of them having a go at the cubs was really high. It's something we intended to film, and you know that's coming, but at the same time, you're kind of like, oh, I hope it doesn't happen, but I hope it happens. So we're at the edge of this ravine where she'd taken her cubs, and you know she's starting, and the male was sleeping literally right next to where she'd stashed them, and she starts moving them away. So she moves the one away, and it's pitch black again, and you're seeing everything through your thermal binoculars, and she moves one away, and you're holding your breath, and you're thinking, okay, one down, 4 to go. And she came and got the second, and when she was coming back, exactly how it unfolds, I wish we could capture like what it truly sounded like. Because as soon as she heard her little cubs were in distress and she came flying in, I mean, she flew down that ravine, and the sounds of her fighting that male, I mean, because they're in the ravine, they were just echoing off the walls, and it's the loudest sound I've ever heard, and I don't know if I'll ever hear anything like that again. And all the hair down your arms is just like standing, and she's fighting and fighting, and because of how she's throwing herself into defending her cubs, you could hear her breathing, which sounded like and I remember telling Rach this, it sounded like she was sobbing because she's trying to catch her breath, but she is just roaring, growling and everything, and she beat that male down, and she's significantly smaller than he is, and you know the sisters come in and all of that. So it's just all these emotions, you're in the height of it, and you don't know who survived, who hasn't. But just being able to live in that and seeing it unfold, and obviously because of the cub that died, you're so sad it happened, because we had gotten to know them. But at the same time, you're like, man, lions are so cool. I mean, it sounded like she was ready to give her life in that fight. And yeah, completely unforgettable. I don't think I'll ever yeah, forget what that felt and sounded like, hearing those yes sounds and seeing that.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing. As I wrap up with all of you today, one, on behalf of Alliance of Women Directors, we so appreciate your time, making time to stop by and speak with us. And I will say that it's now more than ever, it's crucial that we take a look at the natural world for inspiration and guidance. And Queens challenges us to do just that. Different ways of approaching leadership, as all of you have spoken about resilience, strength, and learning from these incredible examples that you have so beautifully illustrated for us on screen. So we thank you for your work. It's an amazing series, and I will say to all of you, all hail the Queens of Queens. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having
Oh,
us.
So much.